We're going to have one heck of a time today. Yeah, just like always. Let me get your comments working, and then we'll fire it up. Best thing ever. Boom, 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 boom. Come on. Come on, comments. You can do it. Technology is a little bit slow today, but there you go. Now we're all good. Boom, 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 boom. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the highlight of human civilization. It's called Coffee with Scott Adams, and it's the best thing that ever happened to you. But if you'd like to take a chance on elevating your experience up to levels that nobody can even understand with their tiny, shiny human brains, well, to do that, all you need is a copper mug or a glass, a tankard, chalice or stein, a canteen, jug or flask, a vessel of any kind. Fill it with your favorite liquid. I like coffee. And join me now for the unparalleled pleasure, the dopamine end of the day, the thing that makes everything better. It's called, that's right, the simultaneous sip. Paul, where are you? So good. All right. Well, let's check in with science and see if there's any work they did that maybe they didn't need to do. Maybe they could have just asked me. Oh, here we go. Fabiana Buontempo is writing about a new study that says if you're a husband, there you are, Paul. If your husband has one of these jobs, he's more likely to cheat. All right. So these are the jobs of people most likely to cheat for the men: CEO, surgeon, physician, or unemployed. All right. Well, you really didn't need to do that study because let me explain to you CEOs, surgeons, and physicians. They would be what we would call the ones that women are chasing after. And they also go to work in a place that's filled with women who are subordinate to them at their place of work. So, yeah, all the men who are high targets and women are trying to sleep with them, they are most likely to cheat. But also the unemployed, because they've got the time. So if you have time or a really rocking job, you're more likely to cheat. They did not need to do that as a study. They could have just asked me. Well, Travis, Kelce, and Taylor Swift are engaged. Finally. The fairy tale is real. What do you think of the odds of Travis and Taylor making it, let's say retirement and living happily ever after? Well, who would be more likely to cheat? A CEO, a surgeon, a physician, or a famous basketball player who's married to Taylor Swift? I don't know. She better put a Ring camera on that guy to follow him around. I'm just saying. It's not a comment about Travis. I'm sure he's a perfectly upstanding person, but he's in that kind of a job, kind of a job. And the other most likely to cheat would probably be Rockstar. So, and they both have jobs where they have to travel around the world without the other one. So, I don't know. They do have the highest odds against them. But on the other hand, both of them have defeated very long odds to be in the jobs they're in. So, if you want to look at it on the golden age way, let's do that. Let's put the positive spin on it. That if anyone could pull off the unlikely, it would be those two, because they've both already pulled off the unlikeliest of unlikeliness. According to Chris Williamson, who I believe had Rob Henderson on his show recently, and Rob was saying that Married men and women disagree on how much sex to have. Okay, Rob, again, maybe you could have asked me and I would have known that part. But there's more. Maybe I didn't know this part. Um, that women typically believe their marriages have about the right frequency of sex, whereas men wish for more, twice as much. So, and it suggests that couples adjust their sexual frequency to the lower rate of desire by the wife. Okay. Um, how could it ever be different? It would only be different if the wife took sort of a prostitute point of view and said, "I'll tell you what, some of the time I'll have this sex and I'll enjoy it, but other times I'll look like I'm just waiting for it to be over. And then you can have as much as you want." Then the guy says, I'll just take the stuff where you're into it. Because if they're just looking at you like, gosh, I got to do some chores, that's not really good for the guy. So yes, the man adjusts to the preference of the woman most of the time. Well, it looks like Ring cameras. Speaking of them, they've got a new device that's a little drone that works inside your house when you're gone. So the drone, it's kind of a small one, will patrol the rooms of your house automatically. So you don't have to do anything. It just does it by itself and creates a little video, I guess. Now, how much do you want that? I want that so much. Do you ever see a new product where you go, I already know I'm going to have one of those someday? Maybe not right away, but yeah, I want one of those. I want one for the outside of the house too. I would like to know that if somebody rings a doorbell or if my security camera picks up, any motion that looks like a person, that my drone on my roof, there's a flat area on the roof, I have the perfect place to stage it, would take off and do a little surveillance to make sure it's not anything bad. Well, enough about me. Vanity Fair employees say they're going to walk out the mother effing door. That's a quote. They're going to walk out the mother effing door if Melania Trump is on the cover, because I guess there's some talk about putting her there. Because there's no way they'd keep their incredibly lucky job to be at the Vanity Fair if they put some beautiful model on the cover that was not their preferred political preference. I would say, unless these are the most irreplaceable people in the history of magazines, I would let them walk out the mother effing door. I would say goodbye to all of them, because who's running that place? Do, do the employees get to decide what's on the cover? I mean, the lower end employees? I don't think so. So, but we'll see. Speaking of Melania, apparently she's announced a K through 12 presidential AI challenge, according to The Hill. And I guess it would be like a contest, and they would urge students across the country to use AI to compete, I guess, for who could come up with the most awesome AI app, I guess. And how much do I love that? I love this so much. Your first ladies, traditionally, they get involved in some cause, but often the cause is sort of just a first lady-ish, kind of a thing, like, with lots of empathy or something with some group that deserves it. But I love the fact that Melania would be working on AI for our youth, because that's like as basic to the survival of our country as anything could be. So instead of working on things like, beautifying something or having better dishes or whatever, she's directly working on the thing that is the only thing that would keep the country, in good shape in the future. It's kind of impressive. It's exactly the right place for her. So I don't know if this is real, but I think it is. I saw a picture of it, so it must be real because I saw a picture. But now that I'm getting ready to tell you, I'm losing my confidence that this wasn't AI. It could have been an AI picture, but the picture showed a perfectly orange shark allegedly swimming off of Costa Rica, and I guess they caught it. And um, it would be a very rare kind of shark, perfectly orange. And I said to myself, you know what? That would make a great national fish for the United States. Wouldn't it be great if Trump said, hey, I just found our new national fish? It's the orange shark. That should be his new logo, an orange shark. All right. Well, I guess SpaceX, the company SpaceX, is now officially the most valuable private company in the world. Now, obviously, there are public companies that are worth more, but of private companies, it's the most valuable private company in the world. It's worth reportedly $350 billion. So that's bigger than ByteDance, that owns TikTok. It's 300 billion, and OpenAI at 300 billion. So that's pretty impressive. They're sending up some more rockets yesterday, I guess. Everything's working out well. Well, believe it or not, Cracker Barrel is going back to the old logo. So they're giving up on their new logo. They're going back to the old one. If you remember what the old one looked like, it was a picture of Mike Pence next to a barrel. Now, I don't know what Mike Pence was doing next to that barrel, but I don't think it was about crackers, if you know what I mean. Anyway, that happened only a few hours after Trump had done a Truth Social post saying that they should go back to the old logo. And a few hours later, Cracker Barrel said, "Yep, we listened to our customers." They didn't say anything about Trump. But they said, "We listened to our customers," and sure enough, I think they may have been listening to their investors too, because they got just hammered. Will it help that they're going to change their minds? I don't know. Do, does that change any of your minds? Do you feel like, oh, yeah, now we can go to Cracker Barrel because they changed that logo back? Well, if you didn't like that they were being woker than most companies are woke, that would be what they're doing. So changing the logo back wouldn't really change anything, right? Except they got a better logo now than they had. So they got some free publicity, but I don't feel like people are going to go back because of the logo. That's not really why they stopped going. That was more just emblematic of the fact that white men were being demoted and everybody else in the world was being promoted. I saw Matt Walsh had some things to say about that. Apparently, and the Vigilant Fox picked this up, that Matt Walsh is saying that there were 8 women and no men on the Cracker Barrel's all-female marketing team. I don't know how he knew that, but I'm sure he's right. And the all-women marketing team basically destroyed a 55-year-old legacy. And he says that DEI isn't diversity, it's displacement. All right. Yeah, I don't like to argue the definitional things, but that's fair enough. And then Matt goes further and he says, take any organization that has gone out of its way to bring down the number of white males in leadership. Have any of those organizations improved as a result? Any of them? And we all know the answer is no. Well, actually, I don't know that. I feel like it's a big world. Somebody must have an example of at least one major company that introduced massive diversity and they did better. That has to exist, doesn't it? I'm not a big fan of discriminating against white men, as you know, but I'm sure it's worked out at least once, even if you don't like it. Well, Trump had his big, what do you call it, cabinet meeting. And I am so impressed with how innovative Trump is for his age. You really don't expect him to innovate just all over the place all the time. And I would say that even, his rallies are innovative. He's doing crypto that's innovative. He's letting he's stimulating all the right businesses at the moment. That's innovative. And but I love his. He did what over 3 hours of an open to questions with his cabinet. Now it's like he's done it several times now, but nobody's ever done that or anything like it, and it makes all kinds of news because he's got all kinds of quotes on different topics. So I wrote down a bunch of them because everything he says is a little bit it's a little bit news making every time he talks. One of the things Trump said about the accusations that he's a dictator, he said, "I'm not a dictator. I just know how to stop crime." Now, he said it kind of with a smile, so he's sort of mocking the people who say he's a dictator. Um, but obviously, as long as Adam Schiff is still alive, he's not a dictator. If you want to know the canary in the coal mine, as long as Adam Schiff can just go to work, and talk on TV anytime he wants, and still gets his paycheck and still does his thing, it's hard to say Trump's a dictator. But the Department of Justice may have something to say about that. We'll see. But I like how he put it. I'm not a dictator. I just know how to stop crime, and that's like perfect framing because you have to talk about both of them in the same sentence. And then it reminds people he knows how to stop crime because he's doing it in DC. Anyway, that apparently it's working. National Guard in DC to reduce crime is apparently the numbers are down, but I warn you that you can't trust any crime numbers anywhere. There are no crime numbers that you can trust. And you also don't know that it'll stay that way. If they take their foot off the pedal, what happens then? I don't know. But the locals, every time you see an interview on the street, it's a local saying, I'm really glad they're doing this. They should do it in Chicago. So the news is having a terrible time finding somebody who says, "Oh, we don't like this. We don't like this dictator stuff." So apparently, the whole dictator thing is something that the news has to talk about, but it doesn't appear to be anything that resonates with the public. Even the people who don't like Trump, they're just not really seeing him stealing the democracy so much. I think they are seeing him reducing crime. So that looks like another, 80-20 or maybe 60-20, whatever it is. Trump wins. And then we get to watch people like the professional liar class, like Jamie Raskin. He's basically almost coming out in favor of not fighting crime. And it just makes him look like such a joker and such a loser. It's hilarious. Um, And apparently, I saw Eric Doherty had a post on X. He said, just came out, according to the AP, there's a new poll that says Trump's approval rating has surged 5 points since he did the DC crackdown. And his new approval on crime is a majority of 53%. So now Trump is solidly in the majority of the country who's enjoying him cracking down on crime. So he wins again, golden age. And 81% of Americans in that survey said crime is a major problem. Yeah, they do. Kevin O'Leary agrees. He was just on CNN and he said, we haven't even mentioned war zones like downtown San Francisco after 7 p.m. where I work, or Hollywood or Los Angeles where I work 2 months of the year. He goes, they are war zones. You can't walk outside at night, period. There are places, there are major cities where you can't walk outside anywhere. I mean, are there not rich parts of that city where you can walk outside? Or you must mean the sort of the business districts in those places, so to speak. Probably too dangerous. You're right. Um, so you know how we joke that the Democrats have to be against literally everything that Trump is for or anything he does right. So you remember that when P. Seth and RFK Jr. did this exercise challenge with a bunch of push-ups and pull-ups, and the New York Times writes an article warning against exercise, the dangers of exercise. Now, I didn't read the article, but I believe it's probably something like, don't overdo it, which is just reasonably good advice. Uh, but the fact that the New York Times would have anything to say about exercise that's not you need more of it. How deep did they have to dig to find out something bad to say about exercise? Well, there was that one guy several years ago who tried to exercise and dropped dead on the treadmill. So you better consider that. All right, here's some serious fun that's coming. It's a serious topic, so I don't mean to make light of the topic, but we're going to have a real interesting time ahead. So here's some foreshadowing. Just feel how big this is. All right. This also came out of the cabinet meeting. Um, so Trump said to Bobby Kennedy during that meeting, he goes, Bobby, the autism is such a tremendous horror show. What's happening in our country and some other countries, but mostly our country? How are you doing on that? Now, as you know, Bobby Kennedy was working on, looking at all the science to figure out what is most likely the cause of a gigantic surge in autism among newborns. And Kennedy said that he'd have something by September. So Kennedy says, we're doing very well. We'll have announcements as promised in September. And then listen to this. We're finding interventions, certainly interventions now that are clearly, almost certainly causing autism. And we're going to be able to address those in September. Wow. Wow. Now, Bobby Kennedy is not one who falls into, let's say, hyperbole, does he? The fact that he says we're going to give you an answer, it may not be the 100% answer, but he's going to tell us something that they've apparently determined with data, they're not guessing at this point, is causing autism. What do you think that's going to be? Do you think it'll be the medicines, or do you think it will be the food, or will it be both? I don't know, but I'll tell you, if they actually discover the cause of autism, doesn't somebody have a lawsuit coming? Well, I guess if they didn't know it, maybe it's not so bad. I don't know. But if there's some food companies who are making food, for example, would they be liable if anybody wanted to sue them? I don't know how that works. If they didn't know, maybe they're not as liable, or is ignorance unrelated to that? I don't know. We'll find out. But boy, September is going to be really interesting, however that goes. Trump said the wages for blue-collar workers are now rising at the fastest rate in 60 years. Well, maybe, but here's my caution. If you're not willing to believe the data when it's not good data, that your team has done something good, if you don't believe the bad data, you shouldn't believe the good data, is what I'm saying. So I don't know that we have good enough data that we can tell that there's been a 2% increase in wages. Do you believe that we can measure that? I famously laugh at the fact that scientists say they can measure the temperature of the Earth. No, you can't. No, you can't. I've lived in the world long enough to know. No, you can try really hard, and you can all agree that you did it, but no, you can't. You can't measure the temperature of the Earth accurately. I mean, you could get a number, but no. And it's the same thing with blue collar workers. Is there really a database that can tell you that wages went up 2% over 5 months? Maybe. I'd love for it to be true, and I do think the president is doing all the right stuff that should lead to that. So whether or not it's an accurate number, I still think they get the A plus for doing all the things that would lead you to the point. Whether it's happened yet or not is a little less important. Um, so here's another thing that Trump did, just sort of off the top of his head, that's going to have this lasting, major impact. Well, listen to this. So y'all know how when Governor Newsom talks, he gets a lot of crap for his jazz hands, and we don't know what that's about. Like his hands are a little too active. It doesn't look like he always did that. It's like a new thing with the jazz hands. So Trump says he's talking about Newsom. He goes, "You have an incompetent governor, Gavin. He is a nice guy, looks good. Hi, everybody. How you doing?" And then he says, "Got some strange hand action going on. I don't know what the hell his problem is. It's a little weird, to be honest. Something shaky going on there." All right, here's why that's genius. It's the same thing he did with Marco Rubio when they were debating against each other for the primary, and he said that Marco sweats too much. If you tell somebody who has a sweating problem that they sweat too much, you've completely ruined their game in public, because that's all they're going to be thinking about. He is so good at trash talk and getting into people's head. Now, those of us on X have chatted and joked about Newsom having funny jazz hands and what's up with that, but we're not the president of the United States. So when Trump says it's a headline, and now there's no way that Newsom is not going to think about while he's talking what he's doing with his hands at the same time. Now he might not change, but he's definitely going to have to think about it at the same time he's doing it. So it's just a way to throw an athlete off their best game. it's so effective and so easy, and Trump just does it like he's just shrugging, and suddenly Newsom looks like a crazy man with his hands, and that's all you'll ever see when you watch him now is his hands. I literally can't wait to see the next video of Newsom talking, because I just want to see if he does anything different with his hands. now it's a thing. Trump is so good at that. Trump on windmills. He goes, "They're ruining our country." Now, I'm not a fan of windmills. I think his argument is pretty strong that it's not great for the environment, and we can do better, and blah blah blah. It's ugly to look at, but I'm not sure they're ruining our country. But I do like his hyperbole. Um, However, do you believe that he's on the side of the majority in his hatred of windmills? Well, no. So this is a rare situation where he's in the closer to the 20 than the 80. The public likes windmills, turns out. So there was a the Washington Post said there was a University of Maryland poll in 23 that found that 68% of Americans would be comfortable living near wind turbines. And the Pew Research Center in 2023 said that 77% of U.S. adults support expanding wind turbine farms. So this is one of those rare situations where Trump is on the minority side. But keep an eye on this, because this will be a good test of Trump's persuasion. The more he talks about it, I'll bet you that it was 2023 that these numbers came out. I'll bet if you did a 2025 poll, you would find that support for windmills is maybe not negative, but I'll bet it's closer to half now. Oh no. Damn it. Here we are. Gary the cat is visiting, if you hear some commotion on my desk. All right. No sit on my notes. Then speaking of Trump's hyperbole, he said all these things during the cabinet meeting. He said that MSNBC maybe is worse than Trenda Aragua, real scum. Now, here's why this is so clever. He said that they're worse than Trendy Aragua. And I spent 10 minutes this morning trying to decide if they were actually literally worse. Now, if you added up all the people that Trenda Aragua has, let's say, killed or victimized in the United States, it wouldn't be a gigantic number, would it? Yeah, I mean, it might be an alarmingly large number in raw numbers, like, hundreds or something, but it wouldn't be, 10% of the population died or anything. So yeah, Trenda Aragua, as horrible as they are and how, important it is to get rid of them, I'm thinking that MSNBC has torn the entire structure of the country apart, and that what they're doing is closer to treason in the biggest country, the most powerful military country in the world, and that although they may not have killed as many people, they have destroyed the quality of life. I mean, they're part of a larger structure that has been propagandist and not news. And so I spend all this time. I don't have an answer for you. It could be that Trenda Aragua is winning on murders, but MSNBC is winning on destroying the fabric of society. So he makes me think about the comparison. If the only thing he'd done is say MSNBC is scum, then I would just go, all right, he always says that, and I would move on. I would spend no time thinking about it. But when he says they're worse than Trenda Aragua, first I laugh because it's such a wild comparison coming from a president. I mean, no president would ever say that. That's why it catches your attention. But then I actually spent time thinking whether it's true. And that is so much more persuasive if it makes you spend time on it. Well, Denmark is apparently angry because they say there's some Americans over in Greenland, which Denmark owns and controls, who are trying to influence the locals in Greenland to want to join with the U.S., I guess. And so Denmark has summoned a top U.S. diplomat in the country because he's got to give them a talking to. So does it make sense that we would have sent some undercover people, some intelligence assets to try to talk the Greenlanders into loving America? It kind of makes sense. It fits with everything I know about how the world works. So, yeah, it makes sense. Well, you know the story of the 600,000 Chinese students that Trump says he will allow to go to college in our country. And if you're like me, you said, I'd like to know more about that. I'd like to know a little more about that. Why would you say yes to that? And how is that America first? Now, part of the answer is that the foreign students pay so much for tuition that it's the only thing keeping a lot of the colleges in business. So it could be that Trump doesn't want a bunch of colleges to close on his watch, and he figures if the majors that they're pursuing are, let's say not STEM majors, maybe there's no harm. And maybe we're just making a bunch of people who like America. If 600,000 people came here from China and they went home really liking America and wishing they could come back and thinking about working here, that might be good. But I don't know if that's why we're doing it. But here's my question that I don't see an answer to. Maybe you do. If colleges have room for 600,000 people, which again would be twice as many as we have now, so an extra 300,000 people, who is it who's not going to get accepted in college because of the Chinese students? Let me give you a quiz and see how well you do it. Let's say there's an American college, and suddenly they can admit twice as many Chinese students. So, to make room for the Chinese students, will they decline admission for black women? Black women? Anybody? Do you think fewer black women will be allowed into college? No, the answer is no, it's not black women. Do you think that they will accept fewer LGBTQ because they need room for the Chinese? No, it won't be that. No. How about women? Just women in general? Nope. No. It seems to me that every single one of these fucking 300,000 extra Chinese students is going to go to college at the expense of a white guy. Am I wrong? So, President Trump, I feel like we need a clarification here. I know it would be illegal for these colleges to discriminate based on, gender or ethnicity, but what is going to stop them from doing it? What would stop them? It's obviously going to come out of the pockets of white guys. Obviously. And so let me just say a hard no on this. Because if you don't have a way to do it without hurting white men specifically, then you don't have a plan that I could ever be behind. So, yeah. I saw Jack Posobiec was coming out clearly opposed to this, and I joined with Jack in clearly opposed to it. Now, if there's some good reason that I have not yet heard that's beyond anything I've mentioned, I'm open to the argument. I mean, I do believe that Trump has earned some flexibility, but he also owes us an explanation. And if he can't promise me that this isn't coming out of almost entirely white men, no, hard no. Nope, and nope. According to, I saw a post by Wall Street Apes talking about how juries are very biased. Now, I'm not sure I totally believe these stats, but they're shocking. And there's some study, let's see if there's a source. I don't know. Some study that claims that black juries have a 12% conviction rate against black defendants, but a 59% conviction rate against whites. So that would indicate that they're far less likely to convict somebody like themselves. And then we should expect to see this everywhere, right? Like everybody would be the same. They would all be less likely to convict somebody who looks like them. Except white juries have a 33% conviction rate against white defendants versus a 26% against blacks, meaning that white juries are more likely to convict a white person than a black person. And also, black juries are more likely to convict a white person than a black person. Does that sound like the data is real? I'm a little uncertain whether these are, I don't know if I would bet my life that this is accurate data. It looks a little fishy to me, but that's out there. So Lisa Cook, the Fed governor, and by the way, what does a Fed governor do for work? Is that even a real job? So yeah, they have their experts crunch some numbers and they make some decisions on interest rates. What else do they do? Because I don't see that Lisa Cook and the other Fed governors are going to be there with their spreadsheets and their and a bunch of papers in the desk and like, all right, I am independently trying to figure out what the interest rates will be. And when I've got my number, I'll compare it with all the other Fed governors and then we'll take a vote. I mean, probably there's like one or two people who are not Fed governors, but work for them who figure out what the interest rates should be based on, what would happen if you did this versus that. And then the bosses just sort of look at the politics and put their, finger in the wind and say, yeah, these other factors, we're going to go this way. But what else does the Fed governor do? Because I don't think that they have much to do with what the interest rate is, not the Fed governors, except for their one vote, I guess. It's not like they're doing the spreadsheet. What do they do? Anyway, so Lisa Cook has been fired by President Trump, but she's doing her best George Costanza impression and has decided that despite being fired, she's going to keep coming to work. George Costanza. All right. I mean, it's a version of Costanza. I know he quit. He didn't get fired in the TV show, so don't be pedantic and tell me that. But of course, she's going to sue, and then the Fed will decide based on how the lawsuit goes, I guess. So that's happening. I saw on CNN it was Krugman, the economist, who was arguing that since she did this alleged problem with the mortgage, where she said she had two primary homes, but it was years ago and it was in a prior job when she was a professor. So, maybe that shouldn't haunt her during this job. And he made the example of, you wouldn't want to punish somebody in their adulthood because they cheated on a test in third grade. So, sure enough, Trump has made Democrats support crime. They're actually downplaying the importance of what would be a jailable offense. Well, I don't know if it's jailable, but it looks pretty bad. Oh my God. You can't win any harder than that. All right, let's talk about experts. I saw a comic Dave Smith was on Joe Rogan again, and they're talking about how Dave Smith gets a lot of heat for getting into all these conversations, mostly about Israel, but other topics as well. And Dave Smith is a comic, not a comedian. I'm sorry, not an expert. And so people say they shouldn't listen to him because he's not an expert. Here's my take on that. We live in a world where the joker and the expert, you can't tell which one's right. So the person who's a joker may just have a cleaner look at the world than the expert, because the expert's usually working for a paycheck. The joker is outside the system and observing it and saying, hey, that doesn't look right. So if you believe you live in a world where the experts have better opinions than the jokers, that's not the world I'm in. I don't see that at all. I listen to people's opinions all day long. It's what I do, and I don't see these experts beating the non-experts. And I also think there's value in listening to the non-experts try to navigate the fake news. Because most of the news is fake, but it's all we have. So watching the expert deal with the fake news doesn't mean as much because they might be part of the scheme. They might be on the side of the fake news. But if you watch somebody whose expertise is that they watch the news and you're seeing them try to wrestle with the news the same as you are, to me, that's really useful. So to say that because he's not an expert, yet he is capable of having, I would say, winning debates with people who are experts on their field of expertise, I definitely want to hear more of that. Why wouldn't I? So, um, and also, there is something to be said for people who are better at spotting BS. So, if the only thing that comic Dave Smith brings to the debate is they can spot things that are obviously, they just don't smell right, or they're too on the nose, or they're just sort of obvious hyperbole or stuff like that. The people who are good at spotting bullshit are the most valuable people you could ever listen to. And there's not any recognized expertise or college major or anything that teaches you to be good at it. But I would argue that some people can demonstrate by their continuous opinionating that they are experts. And if a jester happens to be one of them who's just really good at spotting bullshit, yeah, you want to watch that. You don't always want to watch the experts because they have a really bad track record lately. Speaking of experts, just to make my point about how bad the experts are. So Governor Kathy Hochul of New York um, is complaining that apparently they changed the law, so she was part of that, changing the law to allow bail. So it's not all, no cash bail. They do have situations in New York, and it's because of recent law changes where presumably the cases that make the most sense, there is bail. But the judges, she complains, are acting like it's still the old way. So literally the governor is complaining that the judges, let's call them the experts on the law, don't know the law. That's the governor of the state saying that the judges, who probably are mostly the same political party, that the problem is the experts don't understand the law and that therefore they're not applying it. So there's your experts. How hard would it be Kathy Hochul's not an expert on the law, or is she? Is she a lawyer? I don't know. But she knows that the experts are wrong, or she believes it in this case. Well, apparently the DOJ is investigating whether the FBI under the Joe Biden regime destroyed some documents that would have been bad for Comey and Brennan, I guess. Gateway pundits writing about this, Christina Layla. And I guess that's because they found a bunch of sensitive documents in burn bags, which would suggest that there was an effort to hide or conceal a bunch of documents on certain topics. So were some of the burn bags burned, and some of them were not, and we just found the ones that were not. I don't know. So that might be interesting. Breitbart's reporting, Jerome Hudson's writing that Hollywood is really quiet lately, politically. Have you noticed that? I've kind of noticed that the Hollywood Democrat boosters, they don't seem to be running a lot of fundraisers, and they're sort of keeping their head down because Trump is doing so well and Biden was such a disaster and the Democrat Party is in total collapse. But apparently, reportedly, they're laying low, and the people who would normally fund the Democrat Party just are not seeing enough to fund. And apparently now some of the big bankers are starting to admit, the Daily Caller News is writing about this, William Flake. There's some big bankers who are now confessing that the reason they debanked some people for political reasons was not because there was some risk to the bank, but because the Biden administration put pressure on them. And apparently they were not admitting that was the real reason they did it. They were trying to act like, oh, yeah, these are just normal business decisions, that these kinds of people would be debanked. Apparently that wasn't the case. It was pressure from the Biden administration. So now we have some people admitting it, according to the Daily Caller News. Well, there was a Chinese doctor who was working on, I think, an American base in Germany, and he was caught red-handed stealing cancer research and was taking it back to Beijing with him. So New York Post is reporting that. So don't you wonder if we're doing that too? Do you think we have spies in China that are stealing Chinese secrets? Or it feels racist to me, but we have this pervasive belief in the U.S. that the Asian countries aren't so good at innovating. I don't know if there's anything to that. It just feels a little bit racist to me, or a little bit. What is it when you love your country more than other countries? I'm not sure that's a real thing, um, or maybe it was. I don't know. Now I have heard that different cultures have different approaches to um, failure. So one of the superpowers in the U.S. is if you tell somebody who started 3 startups, and none of them worked out. In America, you're almost as likely to say, "Oh, wow, you're really experienced." Yeah, do you want to try another startup? So failure doesn't hit Americans like it hits other countries. There's a shame to your family or whatever's going on there. So I can imagine that maybe everybody is equally capable of innovation, as far as I know. I mean, I've never seen anything to the contrary, but that there are some cultures that would so punish you for getting one wrong that maybe there's just less experimentation. Maybe that's the whole deal. I don't know. Well, the Trump administration is going hard in their investments to have rare earth minerals being made and processed in the U.S. So we'd break China's grip. Newsmax Money is reporting about that. So there's just a lot going on there. So the bottom line is that the Trump administration is doing the right thing, which is going really hard on rare earths. Now, I was thinking today before the show how many things that Trump is pushing hard that are exactly the right things to push hard. And then I asked, why wasn't Biden doing any of that? For example, this pushing hard on the rare earths, I'm sure Biden did a little bit, but probably nothing compared to what Trump's doing. It's this vital area. Then Trump's doing this major thing with shipbuilding. I don't know if Biden did anything on the topic of shipbuilding, but it's a strategic, critical area for us to be good at, and Trump is going hard at it. I mean, like really serious. Trump, of course, is innovating on crypto like that. Trump seems to be, I'm guessing, he probably got rid of a lot of problems for the AI companies that want to open up their own energy-sucking AI business. I feel like what Trump did is say, you're welcome to do it, but you're going to have to build your own power plant. And then they said, thank you. We'll do whatever we have to because we have to be an AI. We'll figure it out. And then they build their own power plants. Now, to me, again, that seems like amazingly the right thing to do. So there are all these areas, I could go on, but I feel like there are all these major areas where Trump has either already solved it, like the border, or he's putting major resources exactly where you'd want them to be. And is it true that Biden just was incompetent, or he didn't have the vision to get this through, or he didn't have Congress? Maybe that's the difference. But I'll tell you, The big stuff that Trump is doing that would have long-term strategic impact to the country, they really seem right on point, like exactly what you and I would have said should be done. So I'm very impressed that Trump seems to be leading us into the golden age in all the right ways. There's smaller stuff that I, can find things to complain about, like the extra Chinese students, etc. But overall, oh my God, Trump is pushing all the right competitive strategic buttons. And we didn't have that before. Nothing like that before. Trump says about the magnets, that we get from China, but we're trying to make here. We're going to have a lot of magnets in a pretty short period of time. In fact, we'll have so many, you won't know what to do with them. You'll have so many magnets, you won't know what to do with them. Every time he says something like that, it makes me laugh. he, he he has such a distinct character and way of talking. There's just nobody who talks like him, maybe never will be. Here's what it feels like. What it feels like when you watch the Trump administration wisely and smartly go after one thing after another. I could throw tariffs in there too. Maybe it's too early, but it sure looks like the whole tariff thing is going to work, right? Is it too early? I don't know. Looks like it works. Um, so it seems to me when you put all of these together, the emphasis on shipbuilding and AI and releasing energy and all that stuff, everything I've mentioned, doesn't it feel like the IQ of America has just doubled? Because you can look at any topic and you see that we're doing the smart thing that you do in that situation. Take Ukraine. Wasn't the smartest thing to do of the things that were possible to be done that we just stopped funding it and we turned it into a profit center? That was absolutely the smartest thing to do, no doubt about it. I could go on, and list other Trump accomplishments, but if you were to look at them collectively, it's almost like the country's IQ doubled. We're suddenly doing all the smart things. Look at Washington, D.C. It won't be long, if it hasn't happened already, that everyone will admit how smart it was for Trump to go in hard against crime. Everyone will admit that eventually. Right now they have something to complain about, but after he's out of office, people are going to look at it and go, "Oh yeah, obviously we didn't want all that crime, and he's the only one who did something about it." So it just feels like the country's IQ doubled. We just are doing all smart stuff. Yeah. Now again, that doesn't mean I agree with everything Trump does. We're not a cult, right? One of the things that makes Trump, in my opinion, the best president we've ever had is that he's very keyed into the opinions of the base and the non-base as well. And so I believe that he benefits when we show skepticism about something like the 600,000 Chinese students. Doesn't mean he's going to change his mind, but I'll bet you that he would see either my opinion or Jack Posabek's opinion, and it will play a part. It will definitely make a difference that there are people he's heard from before who he will pause and say, okay, why is this person disagreeing? Like, I need to listen to that. And he's really good at that. One of the things that everyone says about Trump, he's a great listener when you're there in person. That's what I experienced the same thing when I met him briefly. I left, and the first thing I thought, my major impression and takeaway, he's a good listener. So it's a superpower. I guess Trump is demanding $500 million settlement from Harvard, so that negotiation is ongoing. I believe Harvard offered some settlement that was less than that, and Trump must feel like he has the negotiating advantage, and he definitely does. But $500 million from Harvard? Will he actually get that? $500 million? I don't know. Maybe. Um, so the Ukraine war, of course, continues to escalate within their borders. And smart people are saying that nothing good will happen toward peace until Zelensky and Putin get together and they're in the same room. Do you believe that Zelensky and Putin can ever be in the same room? Like what? That doesn't track. Now, I can see why, if somebody lost a war, they could be in the room with their enemy because, well, you lost the war. But if nobody lost the war and they're just trying to negotiate, these are two guys who really, really want to kill each other. They want to kill each other. And I guarantee you, both of them have spent extensive time looking over plans to kill the other one. Now, apparently they haven't pulled the trigger on it, or if they have, it didn't work. But don't you believe that they've both put serious effort into literally killing the other one? How did those two guys sit in a room and say, "Hey, glad to meet you finally. Good job in that war. Hey, you did better than I thought. Should we talk about how to wind this thing down? Afterwards, we'll have some drinks." That's not going to happen. In what world do you think Zelensky and Putin are ever going to sit in the same room and work out a peace deal? So I'm going to make a prediction. I don't know which one, but the only way you're going to get to peace is one of these guys dies or leaves office, which might be the same thing, right? We might someday have peace, but not until one of them dies. And, I'm not suggesting that anybody kill anybody. People can die of natural reasons and they can leave office for any number of reasons. But they could leave office. That might get you to a good place. But I don't think either one of them will ever leave office unless they die. That's what it looks like. So I'm not expecting any peace deals as long as the two of them are the leaders. Witkoff has noted that nobody's done more than Trump in narrowing the issues between Ukraine and Russia. But I say, if they can't agree on who owns what land, it really doesn't matter what else they agreed on, does it? There's only one important part of that. Everything else, obviously, they can work that out. Anyway, I guess the head of Germany has said that they can't sustain their welfare state, and Viktor Orban of, Hungary, is doing a little victory dance because he did not go full socialist, and I guess he thinks things are going better in his country. I don't know about that, but it's interesting that Germany is realizing that they can't be so woke anymore. It's not going to work. I hope they don't go hard in the other direction because, as Norm Macdonald pointed out once, I don't know if you're a student of history when he talks about Germany. I don't know if you're a student of history. It's the only country I worry about. They take on the world. He does a whole act on that. It's great. Anyway, that's all I got for you today. Look how close to 1 hour I was. All right, I'm going to say some words privately to the beloved members of my locals community. And the rest of you, thanks for joining. Come back tomorrow, same time, same place. It's a special time, and you don't want to miss it. All right.